the 17th of July, 2005. The sun had been merciless that week. By mid-afternoon, the fields behind the Holloway farmhouse shimmered beneath the heat like ripples in a pond. It was the kind of day that smelled of dry earth, sweet hay, and something older, the dense scent of the great oak tree that stood at the edge of the property. The tree had always been there. Even the oldest family photograph showed it looming in the background, wide and knotted, its sprawling roots breaking through the ground like skeletal fingers. Generations of Holloways had swung from its branches, picnicked beneath its shade, carved initials into its thick bark. That afternoon, Sara Holloway, 7 years old, freckles dusted across her sunburned nose, was playing beneath the oak with her favorite doll. Her brother, John, 4 years older, was supposed to be watching her, but had slipped inside to escape the heat and lose himself in the old family radio upstairs. When their mother called them in for supper an hour later, only John answered. "What about Sara?" Her voice echoed from the kitchen. John frowned, running back outside. The sun had already begun its slow descent, casting long shadows across the yard. The doll lay in the grass near the base of the oak, one small arm reaching toward the trunk. But Sara was gone. They searched the yard first, then the house, calling her name until their voices grew hoarse. Neighbors joined in, combing the fields, scouring the woods beyond the fence line. The sheriff was called by dusk. No broken fence, he noted. No footprints but her own. Search dogs lost her scent within feet of the oak. She couldn't have gone far, her father insisted, face pale beneath the brim of his sweat-stained hat. But as the hours turned into days, and days into weeks, no trace of Sara Holloway was ever found. No torn clothing, no scuff marks on the bark, no drag marks in the dirt, only the doll, still sitting at the roots of the tree. By autumn, the search was called off. The case file was thinned to a few grainy photographs, a sparse report, and a single, haunting note penned by one of the search volunteers. "Tree's too old. Feels wrong." The farmhouse was eventually sold. The family scattered. Only the oak remained, its roots deepening, its branches reaching ever higher, as if feeding on something unseen. And for nearly 20 years, Sara Holloway's name faded from town memory, a whispered warning, a local ghost story, something parents used to scare their children away from the woods at night. Until the letter arrived. John Holloway hadn't been back to Virginia in almost a decade. After the sale of the farm, he'd buried the past as deep as he could, moving north, chasing engineering degrees, and eventually a job in Baltimore. There were no more visits home, no more phone calls to old neighbors, no more long drives down the winding county roads that led to the Holloway place. It wasn't guilt that kept him away, at least that's what he told himself. It was that strange, unspeakable weight that settled over him whenever he thought about that summer. The day Sara disappeared had split his life clean in two, before and after, until the letter came. It arrived on a dull Tuesday, tucked between a utility bill and an oversized grocery flyer, the envelope worn and yellowed at the edges. No return address, no postmark. Just his name, handwritten in neat block letters, John Holloway. For a long moment, he'd simply stared at it, heart thudding. Finally, with fingers that didn't feel like his own, he slid it open. Inside was a single sheet of paper, folded once. No salutation, no signature, just 5 words, typed in faint, uneven print. "She's still here, beneath the roots." John sat down hard on the edge of the couch. It had to be a cruel prank. Some idiot local who remembered the story, digging up old pain for fun. That was the only explanation. And yet, he rose, crossed the small apartment to a battered box of keepsakes tucked behind his closet door. He hadn't opened it in years. Inside, an old Polaroid of him and Sara by the oak tree, grinning in the sun. A brittle school drawing she'd made of "our big tree." Her handwriting shaky, uneven. "The tree remembers." It read in bright crayon. A chill worked its way down his spine. John closed the box and paced the room. Who would send such a message? Why now? After all this time? He should throw it away. burn it, forget it. But instead, that evening, he called his mother. The line clicked and hissed rural cell service was spotty at best. Mom? His voice was tight, unfamiliar in his own ears. A pause, then her voice, thinner than he remembered. John. He swallowed. Did you get anything in the mail today? Another pause. Then, almost too soft to hear, yes. His throat tightened. What did it say? Her breath caught on the line. The same as yours, I imagine. Neither spoke for a long moment. Finally, John whispered, I'm coming home. His mother didn't argue, didn't plead, just said, be careful. And so 2 days later, beneath a gray morning sky, John packed a duffel, locked his apartment door, and pointed his car south, toward a place he had sworn he'd never see again. Toward the Holloway farm, toward the oak tree that had never stopped growing. The road to the Holloway farm hadn't changed much. Still narrow, still cracked in places, still flanked by leaning fence posts and overgrown ditches thick with summer weeds. John drove with the window down, the humid air thick and heavy, smelling of cut grass and something sour beneath it, old wood maybe, or the stagnant creek that ran behind the neighboring field. As he crested the last hill, the farmhouse came into view. He slowed the car. There it was. The paint had faded to a dull gray. Shingles were missing along the roofline. The porch sagged slightly on the west end. The mailbox leaned at an angle, the nameplate long rusted over, but it was the oak that caught his breath. It had doubled in size, at least. Its canopy stretched wide over the backyard, branches thicker than he remembered, knotted and coiled like muscle. The base had swelled, and the roots had burst from the earth like veins, curling across the ground, some snaking toward the house itself. He parked slowly, gravel crunching under the tires, then sat with the engine idling for a long moment. No birds, no cicadas, just whine through the tall grass and the creak of old wood shifting in the heat. John cut the engine. The silence deepened. The front door opened before he could knock. His mother stood there, smaller than he remembered. A thin woman wrapped in a cardigan despite the warmth, her hair more silver than brown now. Her eyes searched his face but didn't soften. Hi, Mom, he said quietly. She nodded once. Come in. Inside, the air was stale, tinged with dust and cedar. The same entry rug, worn at the corners. The same wall clock, still stuck at 11:42. In the living room, the wallpaper had started to peel. On the mantel above the cold fireplace, a small row of family photos remained. Sarah's school portrait still sat at the end. John paused in front of it. The same crooked smile, the same pink ribbon in her hair. His mother's voice came from behind him. She would have turned 25 last month. He nodded. I know. She moved past him into the kitchen. I kept the place up, as best I could. John followed, unsure what to say. On the table sat a second envelope identical to his, still unsealed, still folded. Did you read it? He asked. I didn't need to. Her voice was quiet. I know what it says. They sat across from each other. For a while, neither spoke. Finally, John asked, why now? After all these years? His mother looked out the window. Outside, the oak tree swayed gently in the breeze. I don't know, she said, but it never stopped growing. John followed her gaze. The roots were pressing against the back foundation. John couldn't sleep. The guest room felt smaller than he remembered, narrower, as if the walls had crept inward over the years. The ceiling fan spun with a soft mechanical click, steady but not soothing. Outside, the wind had stilled, and the old oak's branches stood motionless, silhouetted against a cloudy moon. He lay on top of the covers, one arm across his forehead, listening to the sounds of the house. The distant creak of floorboards expanding with the night air, the faint hum of the fridge, and something else, something quieter, like a sigh through the walls. At some point, sleep found him. In the dream, he was a child again, standing in the backyard, The grass was knee-high. The oak loomed overhead. "Sara?" he called. She was there just beyond the tree, one hand resting on the bark, her back to him, her hair in 2 braids. Sara. She didn't turn. He ran toward her, feet catching in the thick grass. The closer he got, the taller the tree seemed, its bark twisting in slow, unnatural spirals. He reached out, and she vanished. Only the imprint of her hand remained, pressed into the bark like soft clay. John woke with a gasp. The room was dark. The fan had stopped. The digital clock on the dresser blinked 12 o'clock, no power. He sat up, heart pounding. From the hallway came a soft sound, a creak, then another. He rose, opened the door quietly, and stepped into the hallway. The shadows were thick. He called out, "Mom?" No answer. Downstairs, the house was still. He walked to the living room, drawn by some half-formed instinct. There, on the mantle, the photo of Sara had fallen forward, face down. He reached to set it upright again and noticed something on the glass. A smear, small, about the size of a child's fingertip. He stared at it. The photo beneath was unchanged. But for a moment, he could have sworn her eyes were looking straight at him, not into the camera, but directly at him. He turned, glanced toward the kitchen window. Outside, in the backyard, the oak tree stood still, but something moved near its base. Just for a second. A flicker of white, like a ribbon. Then it was gone. Morning came heavy and gray. John sat at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee that had long since gone cold. His mother moved about in the background, wordless, folding and refolding a dish towel in her hands. Neither had mentioned the photo. Finally, John broke the silence. "I want to check the basement." His mother froze mid-fold. Her eyes flicked to his. "Why?" "I heard something last night." She opened her mouth, then closed it again. Slowly, she nodded. "Be careful." John retrieved the old iron key from the drawer beneath the stairs. The basement door groaned on its hinges as he opened it. Cool, damp air rose to meet him, tinged with the faint scent of earth and mildew. He flicked the light switch. Nothing. Of course, the power was still out. Grabbing a flashlight from the kitchen drawer, he descended the steps slowly, each groan of the wood beneath his feet amplified in the stillness. The beam of light swept across stacked crates, rusted tools, and dusty holiday boxes. At first glance, the cellar looked the same as always, until he reached the far corner. There, along the foundation wall, thin roots had emerged, pale, sinewy things that trailed down from cracks in the ceiling. Some hung like veins, others pressed flat against the stone. John moved closer. The largest root, thick as his wrist, had split the mortar, weaving its way deep into the wall. The air near it was warmer, almost humid. A low hum seemed to pulse through the stone, faint but insistent. He knelt, running a finger lightly along one of the smaller roots. It was cool to the touch, but pulsed faintly beneath his fingertips, as if alive. His gaze caught on something lodged in the crook of the roots near the floor. An object. He reached in carefully and pulled it free. It was a small cloth ribbon, faded pink, frayed at the edges. Sara's. He remembered it well. She used to wear it every day. It had gone missing the week she disappeared. John sat back on his heels, breath catching in his throat. Behind him, a faint creak echoed through the cellar. He swung the flashlight beam around nothing but shadows. But when he turned back to the wall, one of the thinner roots had shifted, curling ever so slightly toward him. John stood quickly, heart racing. He backed toward the stairs, the flashlight trembling in his grip. As he reached the first step, the hum seemed to deepen, resonating through his bones. A whisper followed, or perhaps the shifting of roots. It was hard to tell. But as he climbed the steps 2 at a time, one word echoed unbidden in his mind. Remember, John found his mother in the parlor, staring out the window. The morning light was weak, filtered through layers of old lace curtains. Outside, the oak stood motionless, its branches still against the slate-gray sky. She didn't turn when he entered. "I went down there," he said softly. Still no movement. "I saw the roots." A long pause. Then, quietly, "I know." He crossed the room and sat in the chair opposite her. This isn't new, is it? Her hands were folded tightly in her lap, knuckles white. "Number." John swallowed. "How long?" She finally looked at him. Her eyes were tired, rimmed with shadows. "Since the spring after you left," she said. "They started coming through the floor, just a little at first. Why didn't you tell me? What good would it have done?" Her voice cracked. "You had your life. I didn't want to pull you back into this." John leaned forward. "Mom, I found Sarah's ribbon." Her breath caught. "I'm not imagining this. There's something happening." "I know," she whispered. "Then tell me." She closed her eyes, took a shaky breath. "After the search ended, the tree started growing faster. I'd hear things at night, the sound of wood settling. I told myself, but it wasn't." She opened her eyes again. "Sometimes, I'd find things in the house. Little things. Sarah's toys, bits of fabric. Once, her shoe was sitting on the porch." John stared. "You thought she was alive?" I didn't know what to think. Her voice grew distant. "I thought I was losing my mind. Then, one night, I heard her voice." John's blood ran cold. "In my room, soft, like a song." She shook her head. "I told myself it was grief, just grief." He leaned back, heart pounding. "It's not just grief," he said. "No," she agreed, "not anymore." They sat in silence, the weight of unspoken years between them. Finally, John asked, "Do you think the letter is real?" His mother looked toward the oak. "I think the tree remembers," she whispered, "and I think it's calling you back." The house felt heavier after the conversation. John wandered its narrow halls, unsure what he was looking for. Part of him wanted to believe this was all some cruel trick of the mind, a legacy of grief and shadows. But the ribbon still lay on the kitchen table, a fragile truth he could no longer deny. The storm outside had begun in earnest. Rain hammered the windows, rattling the old panes. Thunder rolled low across the valley. He found himself drawn upstairs to the attic. The pull-down ladder groaned beneath his weight. Dust swirled in the beam of his flashlight, thick and choking. The attic was unchanged. Boxes stacked like forgotten tombstones. Yellowed newspapers. Faded Christmas ornaments. John moved slowly, fingers trailing over brittle cardboard. In the far corner, beneath an old quilt, sat a battered wooden trunk. He hesitated, then knelt and lifted the lid. Inside, a jumble of children's toys, blocks, a wooden train, and near the bottom a small, worn stuffed rabbit. John's breath caught. Sarah's rabbit. Mr. Hops. She had carried it everywhere. He picked it up carefully. The fabric was faded, the stitching loose at the seams. One button eye was missing. John sat back on his heels, heart racing. They had searched this attic a dozen times after Sarah vanished. Every box had been emptied, every trunk opened. He remembered clearly that Mr. Hops had never been found. And yet here it was, as if something or someone had placed it here. A faint sound drew his attention. He turned off the flashlight, held his breath. From somewhere below, beneath the floorboards, a faint rustling, like roots shifting through soil, or fingers brushing wood. He clutched the rabbit tighter, heart pounding in his ears. The rain had eased by mid-morning, leaving the air thick with the scent of wet earth. John stood on the porch, staring at the oak. Its roots seemed to have crept farther overnight, or perhaps he was only now noticing just how far they reached. A truck rattled up the long drive. John turned as the engine cut off. An older man climbed out, broad-shouldered, stooped with age, a worn cap pulled low over graying hair. "John Holloway," the man called. "Didn't think I'd see you back here." John blinked. Recognition came slow. "Mr. Grayson?" The man nodded. "Earl Grayson. Lived down the road 50 years now. Your folks and mine used to share fence posts." They shook hands. Earl's grip was firm despite the tremor in his fingers. "I heard you came back," he said. "Figured I'd check in. You're not staying long, are you?" John hesitated. "Not sure yet." Earl glanced toward the oak. His gaze lingered. "That tree," he said quietly. "It's not the same as it used to be." John's heart skipped. "What do you mean?" Earl sighed, leaned on the porch railing. "I've watched that thing since I was a boy. Back then, it was just an old oak. Big, sure, but nothing strange." His voice lowered. "But after your sister, after Sara vanished, it changed." John swallowed. "How?" Earl tapped his temple. "Hard to say. Maybe it's crazy talk, but it started growing faster. The bark twisted more. Animals avoided it. And sometimes..." He trailed off. "Sometimes?" John pressed. Earl glanced around, as if the tree might overhear. "Sometimes I'd see lights, faint, just beneath the roots at night, like something moving under the ground." John felt a cold knot form in his stomach. "You never told anyone?" Earl shook his head. "What would they say? Old man's losing it?" He straightened. "But you listen to me, son. That tree's older than this farm. Older than this land being settled, far as I know. Some say the first folks here marked it as a boundary. Others, well, they said it remembers things." John's pulse quickened. "What things?" Earl met his gaze, eyes dark. "Whatever it touches, whatever it takes." With that, he tipped his cap. "Be careful, John." Then he turned and climbed back into his truck, leaving John alone beneath the watching branches. That night, John couldn't sleep. The house felt restless. Every board, every beam seemed to shift under unseen weight. He lay in bed staring at the cracked ceiling. Rain tapped faintly against the glass. The wind had stilled. The old oak stood in darkness. Then a sound. Low, rhythmic. Not the wind, not the usual creaks of an old farmhouse. A pulse. Thump, thump, thump. As if something deep beneath the house was breathing. John sat up, heart racing. He strained to listen. The sound came again, softer now, almost a sigh, carried through the floorboards. Rustle, shift, rustle. Something was moving. Throwing on a sweatshirt, John grabbed his flashlight and crept downstairs. The house was dark, the power still out. He reached the basement door, paused. The air on the other side felt warmer, heavier. Hand trembling, he turned the knob and opened the door. A soft breeze met him, but it was no breeze. It was breath. Flashlight in hand, he descended slowly. Each step groaned beneath his weight. In the beam of light, the basement looked unchanged at first. But as he moved closer to the far wall, his breath caught. The roots had grown. New tendrils snaked across the stone, thicker than before. They pulsed faintly, as if something within them was alive. John approached cautiously. One of the larger roots twitched, shifted. Before his eyes, a thin tendril pushed through a crack in the mortar, curling outward like a searching finger. Rustle, shift, pause. John stumbled back, heart hammering. As he did, the roots stilled, but the hum remained low and steady, resonating through the floor. In that moment, one truth settled over him with terrifying clarity. The tree wasn't just growing, it was reaching, and it knew he was there. Morning brought no comfort. John stood at the kitchen counter, sipping burnt coffee, eyes flicking again and again to the oak outside. The roots pressed visibly against the house now, coiling along the back wall. They looked purposeful. His mother moved quietly through the kitchen. Neither spoke much. A silence had settled between them, not cold, but wary. After breakfast, John found himself drawn to his grandfather's old study. It hadn't been touched in years. Dust blanketed the shelves. Faded books sagged in place. A cracked leather chair sat beneath a yellowed window. The large oak desk remained where it had always stood. John hesitated, then pulled open the lower drawer. Papers, bills, a tin box of keys, and beneath it all, a brittle manila folder marked simply, property. He lifted it out carefully. Inside, old deeds, land surveys, hand-drawn maps of the farm. At the back of the folder, something slipped loose, a thin bundle of newspaper clippings, held together by a rusted paperclip. John sat down, heart quickening. The top clipping was dated June 1949. Local child vanishes near Holloway Farm. A grainy photo showed a young girl, no older than Sara, standing beneath a tree that looked hauntingly familiar. Disappeared while playing near the old oak, parents say. No sign of struggle, no leads. John swallowed hard. Beneath it, another clipping, 1957, another child, another disappearance, same pattern. And another, 1963, 1972. Always the same location, always near the oak. The final clipping chilled him to the core, 1979. Fifth child missing, near Holloway Farm. The byline read, "Locals whisper of a curse. The old oak watches. The old oak remembers." John leaned back, pulse racing. This wasn't just about Sara. It had never been. For decades, maybe longer, the tree had been taking, and now it was calling again. He stared at the clippings spread across the desk. The same headline echoed in his mind, over and over. The old oak remembers. The clippings had left John shaken. That afternoon, beneath the sky bruised with low clouds, he drove into town. The public library was smaller than he remembered, a squat brick building wedged between the pharmacy and the post office. Inside, it smelled of old paper and lemon polish. The fluorescent lights hummed faintly overhead. At the reference desk, an elderly librarian looked up from a stack of index cards. "Can I help you?" she asked. John cleared his throat. "I'm looking for historical records, property maps, anything on the Holloway farm." Her eyes flicked to his. "You're one of the Holloways?" He nodded. She studied him for a moment, then motioned toward the back. "Archives are that way. Basement level, I'll unlock it." Down a narrow staircase, the air grew cooler. The archive room was cramped, lined with metal filing cabinets and dusty shelves. The librarian handed him a ring of keys. "Red tag opens the map case. If you need anything, I'll be upstairs." John thanked her, then set to work. Hours passed in a blur of yellow documents and faded ink. Finally, he found what he didn't know he'd been looking for. A surveyor's map dated 1891. At the bottom, in elegant script, Gravesend Settlement. His brow furrowed. There, in the center of the map, was a crude outline of the land that would become the Holloway Farm. And marked at its heart a single tree. Boundary Oak, the label read. John's pulse quickened. He flipped through more documents. An old ledger mentioned a small settlement, a religious enclave, long since abandoned. Another note, barely legible. Burials unrecorded. Root growth severe. Area avoided by locals. John sat back, breath shallow. Before the farm, before the house, the land had been something else. And the tree had already been there, watching, waiting. A line from one of the clippings surfaced in his mind. The old oak remembers. Now he knew why. It had always been meant to. The house seemed to breathe with him when he returned. John stood in the foyer, map and notes from the archive still clutched in one hand. His mother sat at the kitchen table, a half-empty mug of tea cooling beside her. He didn't tell her what he'd found. Not yet. Instead, after a few words exchanged brittle, careful, he excused himself and went upstairs. Something tugged at him now, a half-formed memory. His grandfather had kept a journal. John remembered it clearly, a thick, leather-bound book, pages yellowed with age. But where had it gone? In the attic, the air hung cold and dry. He sifted through boxes, through old clothing and brittle books. Then, beneath a moth-eaten quilt, he found it. The journal. Fingers trembling, he opened the cover. Inside the front page, a simple inscription in neat hand. To remember what others would forget. John flipped through the first few entries, farm repairs, planting notes, idle musings. But then, a date caught his eye. July 1957. The year of one of the disappearances. The tree grows again, roots thicker, found cracks in the cellar wall, heard sounds beneath the house, not rats. Deeper, slower, like breath. John swallowed hard and read on. August 1957. Children vanish. Sheriff useless. Locals whisper of old tales tree, feeds on memory. I do not believe. I cannot. September 1957. The dreams begin. Sara, my Sara, different Sara, hears voices, says the tree calls to her, begs her to play beneath it. I forbid it. She cries. I weaken. John's heart pounded. Another Sara, another child, drawn to the oak. He flipped ahead. October 1957. I've seen it now. Roots move at night. They creep along stone. They reach. I hear them in the walls. I see what I should not see. I must protect my family. I must remember. November 1957, final entry. The tree is older than this land, older than me, older than grief. It feeds not on blood, but on what we love, what we remember. To forget is to starve it, but who can forget their own? John closed the journal with a shudder. In the hush of the attic, the truth settled over him like a heavy shroud. His grandfather had known, and now so did he. Evening fell heavy and still. John sat alone in the living room, the journal open across his lap. The words burned in his mind. Feeds on memory. But who can forget their own? Outside, the wind had died. The oak stood black against a starless sky. His mother had gone to bed hours ago, leaving John in the hush of the house. At some point, a faint sound drew him from the chair. A soft thud, not from above, not from the walls. From below, the cellar. John grabbed the flashlight. With each step toward the basement door, dread coiled tighter in his chest. The door creaked open. Warm, damp air greeted him. He descended slowly. The flashlight beam swept across the stone walls, now crisscrossed with even more roots. They pulsed faintly, like veins. John moved closer. Then he saw it. Near the largest root, something small lay on the dirt floor. A flash of silver. Heart pounding, he crouched and picked it up. A locket. His breath caught. Sara's locket. He knew it instantly, the tiny silver heart she'd worn on a thin chain. A gift from their father. She'd been wearing it the day she vanished. The clasp was broken, the chain tarnished. John opened it with trembling fingers. Inside, the faded photo of Sara smiled up at him. Tears stung his eyes. Feeds on what we love, what we remember. He looked around the cellar, pulse hammering. The roots seemed to shift subtly, as if aware of him now. A low hum thrummed through the stones, not heard, but felt. Remember. The words surfaced again, unbidden. John backed away, clutching the locket. Whatever this was, it wasn't finished. And neither was he. John couldn't sleep. The locket lay on the nightstand beside him, its faded photo, a constant weight on his mind. At dawn, unable to bear the silence, he padded downstairs. His mother was already awake, seated at the kitchen table, a worn shawl wrapped around her thin shoulders. She looked up as he entered. Her gaze flicked to the locket in his hand and her face paled. "You found it," she whispered. John sat across from her. It was in the cellar, among the roots. She closed her eyes. "I was afraid of that." He leaned forward. "Mom, You knew. You've known all along. Her voice came soft, brittle. After you left, the house changed. The tree. It reached farther every year. At first, I thought I was imagining things. She opened her eyes again, tears shimmering. But then I began finding them. Little things, Sarah's socks, her bracelet, a doll, all things that had vanished with her. John swallowed. Why didn't you tell me? What would you have done? Come running back? Try to fix what can't be fixed? Her voice broke. I was trying to protect you. But now, she shook her head. You need to stop, John. He stared. You don't understand. It's not just about Sarah. There were others. I found the records. I know. Her voice was a whisper. I read your father's journal, he pressed. He tried to stop it. A shudder ran through her and failed. Silence pressed between them. Finally, she reached across the table, gripping his hand with surprising strength. You mustn't go deeper. The more you search, the more it will remember you. And once it knows your name, she broke off, tears falling freely now. You won't come back. John's throat tightened. I have to try. Her fingers trembled around his. Then promise me one thing. He waited. If you hear her voice again, if she calls you into the roots, don't follow. Her eyes burned into his. Some things are meant to be forgotten. Sleep came late, uneasy. John tossed beneath the thin covers, the locket clutched tight in his fist. When dreams finally claimed him, they came swift and deep. He was standing in the backyard. The grass was high, wet with dew. The farmhouse behind him seemed distant, shrouded in fog. Ahead, the oak. Its branches stretched impossibly wide, blotting out the stars. The roots pulsed faintly beneath the earth, as if drawing breath. Sara stood at the base of the tree. She faced the trunk, one small hand pressed flat against the bark. Her hair hung in loose braids. The faded dress she wore that summer stirred in a wind he could not feel. Sarah, he called. She didn't move. He ran toward her, but the ground seemed to stretch beneath his feet. The tree forever, just out of reach. Sarah? This time, her head turned slowly. Her face was pale, eyes too large, shining with something that was not quite human, not quite child. Her lips parted, but her voice came not in sound, but in thought, sliding cold and clear into his mind. It remembers. It wants stories. It wants more. John stumbled. What does it want? He cried. Sarah's gaze seemed to pierce through him. It wants to be known. It feeds on what you remember. She pressed her palm harder into the bark. Don't forget me, John. Please. He reached for her and woke with a strangled gasp. The room was cold. The locket lay on his chest, warm to the touch. Somewhere deep in the house, a faint creak echoed as if something below had stirred at his dreaming. John sat upright, breath ragged. Feeds on memory. Don't forget me. His path was clearer now. He would find the truth, no matter the cost. Morning came gray and thick with fog. John sat at the kitchen table, fingers tracing the edges of the locket. His mother moved around him in silence, eyes shadowed with exhaustion. Neither spoke of the dream, but somehow he knew she understood. After a restless breakfast, John retreated to his grandfather's study. The journal had given him one truth. Now, he wanted more. He began pulling drawers, searching through old folders, brittle envelopes, yellowed maps. Most were land surveys, planting records, irrelevant papers. But in the bottom of a locked drawer, an envelope marked in faded ink, House Original Plans. John's pulse quickened. Inside, he unfolded a large sheet of brittle parchment. The lines were faint, but legible. Holloway Farmhouse, 1902. He studied it closely. First, the familiar. Kitchen, parlor, bedrooms, the cellar beneath. But then, near the bottom corner of the basement outline, a faint rectangle he didn't recognize. A narrow space marked simply, root chamber sealed. John's breath caught The chamber wasn't on any modern plans. He would have remembered. Beneath the marking, a faint note in pencil. Access through east cellar wall. Passage sealed 1958. 1958, the year after one of the disappearances. Hands trembling, John traced the lines again. The east wall, exactly where the largest roots now crept through the foundation. He leaned back, heart pounding. The dream, the journal, the map. Everything pointed to that space. Whatever the tree wanted, whatever it remembered, it was there. And now, so was he. John didn't tell his mother. The map burned in his mind, each line etched with new urgency. That afternoon, while she napped in the parlor, he gathered what he needed. Crowbar, hammer, gloves, flashlight. The cellar door groaned open beneath his hand. Warm air rushed up to meet him, thicker now, almost sweet with decay. He descended slowly. The roots had spread further. Thick tendrils coiled across the east wall, pressing through ancient mortar like veins through cracked skin. John set down the map and studied the stones. Access through east cellar wall. He ran his fingers along the roots. Beneath them, he felt a faint hollow, a space that did not belong to solid stone. Taking a deep breath, he wedged the crowbar beneath the lowest root and pried. A crack split the air, dry and sharp. The root shifted reluctantly. Behind it, a thin seam appeared in the mortar. John worked methodically, sweat beading along his brow. Each blow of the hammer echoed through the cellar, too loud, too hungry. As the seam widened, the hum returned low, steady, bone deep. He paused, heart racing. "Not now," he whispered. "Not yet." Another strike. Another. Finally, a section of brick loosened and fell inward with a dull thud. John knelt, shining his flashlight into the gap. A narrow tunnel stretched beyond, walls of rough earth and stone. Roots lined the ceiling, coiled and slick. The air beyond was warmer still, thick with the scent of damp soil and something older. Root chamber sealed. Not anymore. John's breath came fast. He reached into the tunnel and felt cold stone beneath his fingers. A path. He pulled back and sat hard on the cellar floor. The way was open, and whatever waited beyond was ready. John crouched at the tunnel's mouth, flashlight trembling in his grip. The air beyond pulsed with unnatural warmth, heavy with the scent of earth and something sweeter, almost like rotting fruit. He hesitated. Then, tightening his grip on the flashlight, he crawled inside. The walls closed in quickly, rough stone, packed dirt, thick with roots that hung like tendrils in the dark. Each inch forward felt slower, heavier. The hum grew louder, thrumming through his bones. Ahead, the tunnel widened into a small, hollow chamber. John froze at its edge, breath catching. The roots here were dense, forming a thick lattice along the walls and floor. And within them objects, dozens of them. A child's shoe, its leather cracked and green with age. A tiny metal car, rusted through. A faded ribbon, not Sarah's, but older. John crawled forward, heart hammering. On one wall, the roots parted just enough to reveal a doll headless, one porcelain arm still intact. Above it, a small wooden block, the letter J carved crudely into one side. He swallowed hard. The clippings had been right. The tree didn't just take, it kept. A low whisper curled through the chamber, not sound, but sensation, sliding cold against his mind. Remember, John's vision blurred. More objects appeared in the gloom, a silver hairpin, a marble, a stained scrap of cloth. Each one pulsed faintly with that same impossible hum. He reached out, fingers trembling, and touched the worn leather shoe. A flash of images burst behind his eyes, a child's laughter, running feet, a sudden cry. John gasped and pulled back, chest heaving. The tree didn't just store the objects. It stored the moments. It wants stories. It wants more. Sara's voice echoed from the dream. John backed toward the tunnel, breath ragged. He wasn't ready for this. Not yet. But the tree had seen him now, and it would not forget. John stumbled backward through the tunnel, breath coming in ragged bursts. The chamber pulsed behind him, not with light, but with memory. It wants stories. It wants more. Sara's voice from the dream echoed louder now, blending with something deeper. He crawled fast, scraping knees and palms against the dirt. The roots twitched beneath his touch, slow and deliberate, as if alive. When he reached the cellar proper, he collapsed against the cold stone floor, chest heaving. The hum had followed him. Low, rhythmic, alive. He sat there for long minutes, eyes fixed on the dark tunnel mouth. Then a whisper. Not from the tunnel, from within. Remember. John froze. Remember us. The voice slid through his mind, like cold water, ancient and hungry. Give us your stories. Let us be known. His pulse thundered in his ears. You remember her. You carry her. You can bring her back. John pressed trembling hands to his temples. No, he whispered aloud. We can give her. We can take you. A deeper voice now, layered with many tones childlike, ancient, inhuman. One name, one memory, one given one, returned. The locket on his chest burned warm. You love her still. You remember her. That is enough. John staggered to his feet. Number. You will return. You will give us more. The voice faded, leaving the cellar in heavy silence. But the hum remained low and steady, now bound to his heartbeat. John gripped the locket tight. The tree knew him now, and it would not stop calling. John found his mother in the parlor, her hands shaking as she folded a worn shawl over her lap. She looked up as he entered, eyes wide, already knowing. You went into the tunnel. He didn't answer. You heard it. A small nod. She exhaled shakily, gaze falling to the floor. I should have told you sooner, she whispered. But how do you explain something like this? John sat opposite her. His voice was low, raw. What happened to Grandpa? She swallowed hard. He tried to stop it. Silence hung between them. He found the chamber long before you. He was the first to hear the voice. She looked away, voice trembling. It told him the same thing. One memory for one lost. He thought if he gave it something small, it would let go. John's heart pounded. What did he give? Her eyes shimmered with tears. His brother. John froze. He erased him, she whispered. Gave the tree every memory, every story, every trace. It was as if he'd never existed. No photos, no mention, even my father couldn't remember him afterward. She wiped her eyes. But it wasn't enough. It wanted more. It always wants more. John stared at her. You knew this. All these years. Tears slid down her cheeks. I was afraid, I thought. If we didn't speak of it, if we let it sleep, maybe it would stop. She gripped his hand suddenly, fiercely. But now it knows you, John. It's awake again, and it's hungry. John's breath came shallow. It offered me a trade, he whispered. For Sara. Her grip tightened. No, she said, voice fierce. Don't. You'll lose more than you know. John met her gaze, voice shaking. I can't just leave her. His mother's face crumpled. Then promise me you'll remember who you are, she whispered. Because once you give memory, you can never take it back. Night fell thick and silent. John sat alone in his childhood room, the journal and locket spread out before him. The voice still echoed in his mind. One name, one memory, one given, one returned. He stared at Sara's photo, heart aching. Could it be that simple? Could he trade a memory, just one, and bring her back? But what memory? And at what cost? His grandfather's words haunted him. You can never take it back. John rose, pacing the room. Outside, The oak loomed larger than ever, its branches etched black against the star-streaked sky. The roots seemed to pulse faintly in the dark, as if waiting. "Don't forget me." Sara's voice from the dream. John clenched his fists. He couldn't forget her. He wouldn't, but if he didn't act, if he didn't try, was that not another kind of forgetting? Tears burned his eyes. How do you choose between love and memory? Between saving someone you've lost and losing a part of yourself forever? He glanced at the journal again, flipping to the final page. It feeds on what we love, what we remember. To forget is to starve it. But John knew the truth now. It would never starve. Not as long as someone remembered. And he remembered too much. His gaze settled on the locket, on Sara's smiling face. "You can bring her back." He exhaled slowly, decision settling over him like a shroud. Tomorrow, he would return to the chamber. Tomorrow, he would make his choice. No matter the price. Morning broke pale and cold. John stood at the cellar door, flashlight in one hand, the locket tucked safely into his pocket. A note lay on the kitchen table, 3 simple words scrawled for his mother. "I'm sorry, Jay." He couldn't bring her into this. Not now. Not with what he was about to do. The house felt heavier as he moved. The floor groaned beneath his steps, as if protesting. But John pressed on. In the cellar, the air was thicker than ever. The hum had deepened overnight, now a slow, steady throb that vibrated through the stones. The tunnel gaped before him, dark and waiting. "You can bring her back." The voice was softer now, almost gentle. One memory, one returned. John took a slow breath, then crawled forward. The roots brushed his shoulders, cool and slick. The hum seemed to grow louder with each inch. When he reached the chamber, it felt different. The roots had shifted, pulling back slightly, revealing a small hollow in the center of the floor, a space prepared. "We are ready." John knelt, heart hammering. He withdrew the locket, fingers trembling. "Choose." Tears stung his eyes. He knew what it wanted, not the locket, not the object, but the memory it held. "Give us her, or give us you." John gripped the locket tighter. He thought of Sara's laughter, her bright eyes, the way she'd chased fireflies beneath the oak. He couldn't give that up, but what else could he give? Then it came to him. A night long ago, his first dance, the girl whose face he could barely recall now. A fleeting, unimportant moment. "Will this be enough?" he whispered. One given, one returned. John pressed his palm to the earth, focusing on that one fragile memory. The hum swelled. The roots quivered. The chamber seemed to breathe. The air growing warmer, heavier. Then stillness. And a single word. Accepted. John gasped, falling back. The locket burned hot in his pocket. Something was changing. The tree had taken its price. Now it was time to see what it would give. The chamber pulsed with heat. John knelt, breath ragged, heart hammering against his ribs. Accepted. The words still echoed in the air. The roots shifted, pulling back, revealing a narrow path deeper into the earth. Drawn by something he could not name, John crawled forward. The tunnel opened into a second chamber, smaller, circular, its walls slick with coiled roots. In the center stood a figure, barefoot, pale. A girl, Sara. John's breath caught. Sara. She turned slowly. Eyes too bright, skin too smooth, yet her face, it was hers. John. Her voice was soft, distant, as though coming from far away. He stumbled forward, tears streaming. Sara. She smiled faintly. I remember you. John's throat tightened. It's really you? She tilted her head. I am what you remember. The words sent a chill through him. But are you real? A flicker of sadness crossed her face. I don't know. But you called me. And now I am here. John reached out, fingers trembling. But before he could touch her, a root slid between them, pulsing faintly. One memory, one given, one returned. Sara's eyes shimmered. You shouldn't have come, she whispered. I had to. His voice cracked. I couldn't leave you. She looked down. It's too late. The tree remembers me now. It won't let go. John shook his head. Number, I can get you out. We can. She met his gaze, tears falling. If you take me, it will take more from you. It always does. John's pulse thundered. I don't care. She smiled, soft, broken. I do. A low hum rose around them. The roots quivered, closing in. Choose. Sara's voice came one last time, a whisper in his mind. Let me go, John. Remember me, but let me go. He fell to his knees, sobbing. I love you, he choked. I know, her voice answered, fading. The chamber dimmed. The roots closed once more. And Sara was gone. John sat alone in the cellar, back pressed against cold stone. The tunnel gaped before him, dark, pulsing faintly, like a living wound. Sara's voice still echoed in his mind. Let me go. But he couldn't. Not completely. Not yet. The locket lay in his palm, warm from his grip. He stared at it, tears falling freely now. One memory, one given, one returned. He understood now. The tree didn't just want moments, it wanted meaning. To truly release her, he would have to give something deeper. A piece of himself. He closed his eyes and chose. The summer they had built a fort beneath the oak. The laughter, the whispered secrets, the way she'd smiled at him with unguarded joy. Take it. He pressed the locket into the earth, palm flat, heartbreaking. Take it all. The roots surged forward, coiling gently around the locket. A deep hum filled the chamber, resonating through his bones. Memories blurred, colors fading, sounds thinning. He gasped as the weight of the moment drained from him. When it was over, the chamber fell silent. The roots withdrew. The hum ceased. And for the first time in years, the house above felt still. John sat motionless, hollowed by what he'd given. Not empty, but changed. Slowly, he rose. Brick by brick, he sealed the tunnel. No mortar, no force. Just enough to close the path. Enough to tell the tree. Enough. When he was done, he placed Sara's photo on the cellar shelf, not beneath the roots, but above them. A promise. A memory that would remain. One that the tree would not have. I will remember her, but I will not feed you anymore. With that, John turned, climbed the stairs, and left the cellar in darkness. Behind him, the oak stood silent, watching, waiting, but no longer hungering. At least, for now. 1 year later, the farmhouse sold. A young couple with a son eager to leave city life behind, drawn by the land's low price and rustic charm. They painted the rooms, repaired the porch, left the cellar sealed, bricks undisturbed. The oak remained, taller now, its roots stilled for a time. No stories were told of Sara Holloway. No one spoke of the tree. But sometimes, late at night, the boy, no older than 7, would stand at his bedroom window, gazing out at the yard. Who's the girl? He asked one evening, pointing toward the oak. His mother frowned. What girl? The one with the braids. She waves at me. His father laughed it off. Too many ghost stories. But that night, as the house settled into sleep, the boy crept downstairs, past the quiet kitchen, past the cellar door, to the backyard. The oak stood silent beneath the stars. Yet, as he approached, a soft breeze stirred the grass. A faint giggle echoed through the branches, high, bright, familiar. The boy smiled. I won't forget you, he whispered. Above him, the leaves rustled gently, and the old oak remembered.